back to inspections, you think? So
Yes.
we talked about buried oil tanks.
Yes.
What are some of the things you see, like the top 3 things
Ooh.
you have and it's obviously different for every client.
Of course.
But as a realtor, what are the top 3 things that you think that buyers should look out for the most? And things that, potentially could really railroad the deal if you're into an inspection?
That's a good question. And, a lot of these things, expectations can be set depending on what you're looking at. If you're looking at something that is going to have a ton of work and it's priced accordingly, then, your list of priorities can definitely change based off of what you're good at. But, the standard is roof, foundation, and then, of course, plumbing and electrical are some of the bigger things.
Especially with the Nanaimo homes where they're built in, 1800s, early 1900s, like you got these, knob and tube and all these different types of stuff we haven't seen, a lot of people don't even know about.
Well, especially, and you alluded to it where, Nanaimo, a lot of people are surprised by is the second oldest town in British Columbia.
Yeah.
We have 100-plus-year-old homes that are pretty common, especially through the downtown and old city area. And when you start looking at homes that have had generations of people living in it, there's a lot of handy people out there.
Patchwork, right?
A lot of, like you'll find electrical over electrical over electrical. And it's hard to decipher what you're really looking at. And, especially with homes in the island moves a little bit slower. And so making sure that, a home that might be past the standard range of having asbestos or poor plumbing or wiring, and that's a situation where, we've always done things a little bit slower compared to the mainland and everywhere else.
Island time, we call it, right?
Exactly. And so that's where having that inspection and looking at some of the more detail-oriented things like, well, is there asbestos in the attic? And even if there isn't, there might be some in the tiles or the walls. And that's something where it's a lot harder to test for.
Yeah.
But if you're planning on knocking all the walls down and doing a massive amount of renovations,
you got to know, right? Because that changes your budget of $30,000 for renos to $50,000 because you got to remediate the asbestos and stuff, or more money, right? Like just throwing out a ballpark figure there. So that's definitely true. And I had a home out in Crofton that my buyers didn't end up going through with. We had a whole inspection, which was great for them. It gave them a lot more clarity on, like the big thing was like your electrical panel, right? Because some of those homes, I found this out recently with that inspection, was there's certain breakers out there that have like burst into flames and stuff. Like the way they had it, right? They had aluminum going in there, and it would it would heat up, catch fire, and boom, right? Stuff like that. And then the poly B as well.
Yeah, poly B is a big one, especially for any sort of 90s build homes. It's and a lot of people weren't familiar with poly B. Basically, back in the 90s, we found this new tubing and plumbing material that we're wow, this is way cheaper than the stuff we've been using, like copper and all these other material. But it's so much cheaper. What's the downside? And years later, found out that this the poly B material in particular was great at transporting just water.
Yeah.
But if that water had debris or kitchen waste or soap or anything else, you would find these little pinhole leaks that can start to show up, and sometimes it's you're not getting that, and it's working fine, and it's worked fine for years and years. But the big thing as well is that right away for home insurance purposes, they're going to look at right away they're going to say, poly B, here's your premium at a much higher rate than what you would be paying if it didn't have it, and of course if you're looking at a home that has like radiant heat through water, and the whole house is poly B, you could be in a situation where you're, ripping out the floorboards and having to basically dig out plumbing throughout the entire home.
Yeah.
And it could be a total nightmare. So it's something where it's something to be aware of. It's something to add to the list of things if you're getting an inspection. Does it have poly B? Is there any sign of a buried oil tank? Is there old knob and tube wiring, or what's the main ticket items here that are going to give you some issues?
And you have to look in the eras, right? Like your realtor should know, okay, in this from the 90s on, you should look at poly B, or from the 60s and stuff, we're looking at asbestos, right? They should all know that. Every house is different, obviously. You're probably not going to have a home built in 2015 and you're like, hey, is there a buried oil tank around here, right?
Yeah.
You're probably not going to have that. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't put it past.
Well, it's possible. Who knows what the old house was before?
Well, exactly. You never know, right? Yeah. But there's certain things you have to look for in certain, in certain areas.
Totally. And a couple other things when we're talking about unique Vancouver Island things. to look out for if you're looking at a home. There's even some differences between, you know, Victoria and Nanaimo, or Nanaimo to Sayward, or there's, you know, that's why you see a lot of agents who are Victoria specific, just work in Victoria, or people in Nanaimo who are Nanaimo specific. You don't see a lot of crossover between those two markets. And, you know, I think that because there is a lot of nuances between the two. Victoria takes their heritage sites and their heritage buildings, historical buildings, quite seriously. And there can be pretty stringent with the rules of what you can and cannot do to an old historical building. And that's something that you really have to look out for if you're looking at some of these older character homes and you're like, wow, this is great. What a lovely old home, but I want to paint it a certain color, or I want to renovate it a certain way.
Redo the kitchen, or put something in there.
Or update the windows. You know, those are all things that potentially, you know, you could buy the home and then you go to do this work and someone from the city shows up at your door and says, actually,
those windows you just paid $35,000 for, take them out.
Exactly. But and in Nanaimo, we're far less strict with what you can and cannot do. There's very few historical buildings that the city will put their foot down. The Bastion,
which is a funny one, I think. When you told me that, I didn't know that.
It's like, that's really the Bastion, which is our really old. It's more of a tourist attraction. No one's living in it. Is one of the only buildings in Nanaimo you can't change. And that's interesting, because you see a lot of these homes, you would think, wow, this is over 100 years old, looks pretty original. Would we be able to do any renovations or even touch anything about this home? And most of the time it's go for it. We'll give you some suggestions. You know, hey, paint it a certain color, or you know, make sure if you want to keep the historical integrity, here are some suggestions, but they can't force you to.
And have you dealt with that? Like, I've never dealt with that personally. Like, I've never had a client buy a house old enough. I guess I had my mom buy an older house where it wasn't any historical stuff we checked. It was all good. But I've actually never dealt with having, you know, some suggestions provided, and like, you know.
It's great. I was quite surprised. I had a client of mine who was looking at a home on Victoria Ave, which is not in Victoria, but in Nanaimo, close to downtown. And it was a home that was, I think, built in 1901 or something like that. And it was this grand Victorian style home, and was spectacular looking, and had a lot of its original integrity. And I went to the Historical Society with the city of Nanaimo and was like, hey, clients potentially interested in buying this home, what can and what can't they do to the property in regards to renovations? And they're like, well, you know, we would suggest to keep this type of paint, and we'd suggest all these things, but legally they could do whatever they want. And I was quite surprised to hear that. But it's, you know, one thing, if you're driving around Nanaimo, you might notice a lot of BC box style homes. And it was back in the day, that was the cheapest way to build a house, and it was a very popular way to build a house. And there's all these character homes that were getting knocked down, and a slew of these 70s, 80s style homes that were just built. So we have whole neighborhoods that look like the BC box style home.
I guess, and I understand why you said it's literally a box, you know, a big rectangle. So usually you see a 4-bed, 2-bath, or whatever it is, right?
Easy to change, or
easy to change, easy to renovate, and you know, those actually jump up quite a bit in price now, because you see a lot of people putting suites in them too, right?
Yeah, well, it's you know, it's a great template. You know, it's size wise and layout wise, it's very easy to adjust and change. But
talking about Nanaimo a lot, so you're talking about knocking stuff down and building new homes like these BC boxes and stuff. Like Nanaimo, like unlike Vancouver and other places in Victoria, is like you have a lot bigger lot sizes here, right? Like you're getting you know, 0.15, 0.2 of an acre, like these old, these old city lots kind of thing that you just don't get now. You know, you see them getting rezoned to, you know, 0.1 of an acre, and they have these skinny houses with, you know, a little bit of a backyard, but you know, you have 6 foot between your neighbor, right?
So that's basically a townhouse, but not.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. So that's kind of interesting, I think. And then I don't know. Yeah, like. And I'm trying to think, inspections. What else can you know? There's
what are some other things to look out for? You know, in Nanaimo, a few things that people aren't aware of is that Nanaimo was originally created as a coal mining town. Yeah, that's a big thing that a lot of people don't realize when they show up to the island and they're checking out Nanaimo in particular. You know, obviously Nanaimo, it's super central. We're basically almost dead center of the island.
Well, to touch on that before, because I love that people go, "Oh, why would you want to live in Nanaimo?" You know, you think about it, and you're an hour and a half from Victoria. You know, an hour and 10 minutes if you drive fast. You're a 20-minute seaplane ride to Vancouver, or an hour and a half ferry. Like people are, "Oh, I want to live in Kelowna, or I want to live here." It's, you know, the island living, you get this crazy lifestyle of ocean, mountains, everything you want, and you're closer, and it's cheaper to go to Vancouver than it is to come down from Kelowna.
Oh man,
you miss the Coquihalla, which is always treacherous. I don't like that drive at all.
No.
And so I think when you talk about Central, you said not only on the island and Tofino and all these other places, but like access to the mainland. It's really, and with the fast ferry coming in, I mean, they've talked about that for a long time.
It's coming next summer, any day now.
If it does come, right? That's another huge thing. Is it's 50 minutes and you're down in Gastown. Like that's you want to go on a date night or you want to do something like that. It really adds value for a lot of people that are or even if you work in Vancouver and you have to commute 2 days a week or whatever. So what? You drive from Pitt Meadows to Vancouver for 50 minutes, or you take a fast ferry.
True. That's so true.